Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Raphael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Raphael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Vinnie, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you, my friend?
Great, sir. How are you?
Exceptional and getting better every day.
Hey, that's when you listen to what the cosmos are telling you, there's
Right.
no other direction than better. So it's good to hear, by the way. I haven't
Yeah,
seen you in a minute, by
absolutely.
the way. So welcome to 2023. It's great to see you. Thank you for having me back and here again at the same time.
Yes, sir. We have so much to talk about. You have made an impact with so many people, and
Thanks.
I am thrilled to have you on my show, but thrilled to have you share your experience with everybody, for everybody to get to know the exceptional person that you are and what you're doing. 2023 it's the beginning of the year. We've had a few days to really decide what this year is going to be like, right? And now we're in it, right? Now, is it going to be the same? I don't think it is going to be for you. I think you have a lot of things planned. Life has to continue. We need to make changes in the way we do everything, right?
Yeah, I think, by the way, I look at life, I look at reality TV, both of these gigantic, enormous volumes I look at them all as a baseball game.
Mm,
There's innings, there's outs, there's errors. We're going to get there. And
right,
slowly and methodically, inning by inning, and annually by annually, day by day,
right.
we get better. We
We
do.
do. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about little Vinny. When when you were a
Uh-oh.
child, right?
Yeah.
What what possessed you when you were younger? And I don't mean possess in a negative way, but to do some of the things that you did even as a kid, because it's the people that influenced us when we were little.
Mm.
It's the emotions we went through. It's the challenges we had. It's it's even the thoughts we had that eventually reflect to who we are today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love the way you framed this.
Mm.
I would say that I'm thinking of little Vinny. Yeah, I was able to turn some coping mechanisms into some superpowers. That's
That's
that's for
awesome.
sure. That's for
Nice.
sure. I'm the oldest. Growing up, I'm the oldest of four. Now, as an adult, I'm the oldest of six children.
Mm.
Um, uh, Pre-internet, so there was an awareness of what we didn't know, but we didn't quite know how much we didn't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
It wasn't as quantifiable maybe as it is now, perhaps. Um, some decisions were made in my family from my parents that I had no control over, but affected us and the siblings. Alcohol abuse, drug abuse,
Mm.
a divorce,
Right.
changing religions, changing schools. I can go through a list of things.
And you and I grew up very similar.
Oh, yeah? Oh,
Oh, yeah.
man, I'm so sorry that you had to go through what you did, but what a beautiful person you are, and it
It's
turned
because of that, right?
you have stamina, yeah, and it true I wish it on no one,
All
by the
right.
way. I wish it on not a single person. That being said, um, there's so much power in how we rebound and create our own paths.
Mhm.
I can go. So I'm the oldest of four, by the way. Putting people first for me came easy. I had siblings,
Mm.
so I quickly learned to not want anything. I learned to focus on other. I learned to not want anything to minimize. I should finish that thought. I learned to
Mm.
not want anything to minimize disappointment. So if I
Mm.
didn't want anything, I can't be disappointed. If I get
Right.
it, then I could be happy, but it's, fate starts coming into play, and how my understanding of the law of attraction starts coming into play here.
Right.
Putting people's goals first. That's been a career MO for me, like
Really?
putting other people on camera and making their dreams come true, and fighting in the room for them to have access to audiences and platforms. And
Mm.
I was lucky to get to work with Mandy Moore when she was 15,
Mm.
and brought her into MTV and to her first TV appearance, and was lucky to get to cast Beyonce in her first film,
Mm.
while I was a casting assistant at MTV. You have ability to really protect people and their
Yeah.
journey a little bit, right? You want them to have individuality. I'm talking as a sibling and as a casting director. They- I want them to be protected, but I want them to have individuality as well.
Mm.
I want them
Right.
to be able to do it completely their way, but I need everyone to understand what that looks like on both sides of the equation.
Right.
By the way, that's when I learned that castings, most people go into a casting and they're nervous about their performance. And if you just think about the way that you can make this producer's job the best, most easiest, most memorable day ever, if that's the MO,
Mm.
then
Right.
success. It's all about that collaborating.
Yeah.
I learned that adults say things that they don't necessarily do. They might mean it,
Mm.
but they don't do it, or they might do
Mhm.
it and not mean it.
Right, right.
These actions where words are one thing and actions are another really help me understand a person's character.
Mhm.
I think I use that in casting, and I've kind of just throughout MTV. By the way, one of my first big sort of jobs, after launching my agency, was to create the talent development department at MTV. And
Mm.
while at MTV, we created Punk'd and Newlyweds and Osbournes, and just a tremendous amount of unscripted programming.
Wow.
We helped like the top 1% creators change their lives, change their careers, change their trajectories, the scope of what they were capable of. Like, we gave Ashton Kutcher not just a show, but like it kicked off his media empire. He
Right.
needed this win, this cataclysmic win on
Mhm.
MTV to show the world what he was capable of, how much his finger was on the pulse of
Mm.
what brought people together, what created community, what created change.
Right.
I think you also learn. I also learned the responsibility that comes with having a creative mind. If you're
Oh
going
my
to put
gosh,
ideas out
yes.
there and words out there, responsibility is everything. That's when I say I'm sorry about what I did casting Housewives of New Jersey. That's the only one that I'm going to say I'm sorry for. Everything else on Bravo, I absolutely love. But those women do different things that I thought they would never do on camera.
Mm.
Producers push them in a certain direction as well for years, but now there's more responsibility at that network
Mm.
with those producers and with that talent. And I think that that's what's changed the tone of storytelling, that's allowed characters to develop more. And in this
Yeah.
day and age where everyone says story is like the most important thing, I'm like, really, story? Because I can tell you about David and Goliath as characters, and you can give me a completely different version of that
Right.
story than I was taught. Or I
Mm.
can go on and on about the characters that stand the test of time, where stories don't. They become fairy tales and
Mhm.
fantasies and
Yeah.
news, or sordid news, or
News, right? Yeah,
that
there you go.
weird
Hey,
section
real
of
news.
fact and news, that weird intersection there. But helping people stand out in that process, being sustainable, really approaching it from a healthy perspective, where you're successful because of your surroundings, not in spite of your surroundings. That's what I wanted so much as a child, and that's what I do day one, since I've been able to
Mm.
help get people on camera, on audio, in films, in TV, get their shows sold, books seen, podcasts heard,
Right.
podcasts
Beautiful.
broadcast. I love that intersection, and I'm really excited about right now in 2023 about the power that small business owners, independent creators like me and you,
Mhm.
have to own our intellectual property.
Right.
And most of my experience and my background is someone selling IP to an American network. In America, the networks claim ownership of the IP. In other territories, that's not true.
Mm.
So Apprentice was sold outside of America, and then it was licensed a version of it was licensed to America, so the ownership is different. Ownership over IP is everything, and podcasters, whether you're a guest or a host, have that IP now. That's one of the most valuable
That's a
things I
beautiful
think we could
thing.
be creating. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I love the fact that, you brought back your childhood and you put it into your current role.
Hmm.
But we missed a couple of things, didn't we?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, you're a good one, huh?
Because I pay attention and
Got
because
the
I'm
spotlight
interested.
on. Yeah, I'm here.
I'm definitely interested because, you said you were the oldest and you felt like you had to take care of your younger siblings. You had to help other people, but something in you made that happen.
Hmm.
It wasn't like, this is your role, this is what you have to do. No, something in you triggered that. You realize, and you talked about abuse, and you talked about different ways of, you grew up and moving to different schools and so forth. I think that looking out for other people, you took on that as a responsibility for yourself, right? And who would you say was your, and listen, I've had so many different people influence my life, both in a negative and a positive way.
Yeah.
And I value them both. The
Yeah.
people that
Yeah.
hurt me the most, man, they taught me great
Oh
lessons,
yeah.
right? Don't get me wrong. I don't want anybody to go through what I went through, like you said,
Yeah,
right?
but I don't need to learn that the oven's hot the long way.
No, or
You
over
know,
and over, right? You
yeah,
learn it
yeah, yeah,
once.
exactly.
But here's the thing, right? When we think about, I don't want anybody to go through my experiences, but we all have to go through some challenges in our lives because otherwise, listen, if you woke up from the minute you were a child to the time you're an adult and everything was peachy and everything was perfect, what would happen to you when you walked into a studio, your first job or anything, and things didn't go peachy and nice? You'd probably fall apart. So
Yeah.
it's those
Yeah, there's a whole
it's
generation that you're defining right there
yeah,
too. No,
well,
they're real, right? I think the millennial generation gets a lot the archetype of overprotected,
yeah,
and we like exactly what you said. We the woke generation didn't want them to go through it. We literally nerf proofed the earth
yeah.
and killed it
Bubble.
while doing it, by the way.
Remember the movie with John Travolta, The Bubble? Kid
The
in the Bubble?
bubble, exactly, exactly. We put the kids in
But
the
he didn't
bubble. Yeah.
want to be in it.
Jake Gyllenhaal was the kid, right? I think so. He was the kid
Yeah,
in the
but
bubble.
he didn't even want to be in the
No.
bubble.
No. Well, and that
He
was
wanted to
not twice.
experience.
Yeah, and look at them, and they revolt, right? And then you see now how there's they have different financial priorities. Then
Mhm.
I mean I'm Gen X, so I throw that, I'm Gen X. I'm
Right,
born
right.
77, but as I said, I really focus on my brother and sister. My younger brother and sisters were born in 84, 85. That demographic has been a demographic that I've been entertaining and educating my entire. I'm like locked in I am locked in talent wise and audience
Mhm.
wise. I'm locked in to helping create words and energies that they really respond to. And now their children, come to. So and I bring up this MTV stuff and some names, and my eye just twitched because I always get awkward talking about some celebrity names because they can be big and overburdensome.
Right.
As a shared experience, I just want to show maybe y'all saw some of my shows. I saw the same things you saw too, and
Mhm.
then you did something different with it than I did, and I did something different with it than you did. That's the part that um,
That's
I'm most
intriguing.
interested in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the part I'm most interested in.
So who
Sure.
would you say growing up before MTV, before any of these things, say before even 10 years old, who would you say was a role model for you?
Oh, my grandmother, my grandma
Nice.
Fran. Yeah.
Mm, mm.
When I think of numbers, I think of her. I think of I think of her playing cards. I see like four hearts. I see three spades. When I think of numbers, when I think of math, the
Mm,
times table, it was all down with her.
nice.
I'm about 15 years younger than my than my youngest uncle on my dad's side. We all grew up in my grandmother's house. I grew up in
Mm,
the same bedroom that in the same house and the same bed. I went to the same school that my dad and his siblings went to. My dad's the oldest of 6 also.
Gotcha.
And in Staten Island.
There
And
you go.
I had the same teachers, for better or for, I should say, for better and for worse.
Yes.
There's a couple of times it worked to my advantage, sometimes not. My relationship with my grandmother, the hours I spent going through the encyclopedia with her,
Wow.
hours I spent, learning her recipes. It's weird to say this. My brother was just over recently, and I was preparing dinner. And I was like, "Well, what do you make that's kind of like how the way, our parents made it?" And I was kind of like, "Huh." I'm like, "My job." No, I don't. I didn't. My job was not. My job was keep the kids out of the kitchen. My job was not anywhere
Right.
in there. And if it was, I don't know. I was a pretty frustrated teen.
Mm.
But she also taught me the power of taking control. I would play cards I would play cards and math games. Oh my gosh, I loved math games.
Yeah.
I think that primed me for coding and being a coder. By the way, I'm a data guy. I got
I
my
love
job at
it. I love
MTV
it.
because I knew how to work databases in Microsoft Word. I could wire 2 VCRs together to edit 2 VCRs because I used to get frustrated that I couldn't record it the way I wanted to. So someone taught me how to wire. All about creating space, all about creating my
Yeah.
terms.
Yeah.
And then there was this one other driving force, I would say, throughout my entire life, as early as 10, perhaps, when I really wanted to be an individual. I did not want to be able to be compared. It's so weird to say this. I strived so hard to be unique.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it by finding ways I was most relatable, the most, boring facts about me, the things that are like the most obvious that we all share in common. So I can
Right.
understand the pieces that, make me unique in this world. I didn't have the ability to go on social media and post my story, my image, my likeness, and then people like it, share it,
Not back
heart it.
then, no.
There's no feedback like that back then. And I wanted that so bad. I turned to databases. Like, I loved the internet. I spent
Mm.
hours creating web pages on GeoCities in like
I remember
1992.
Geocities. I
Yeah, like
remember that.
hard coding, just like HTML. I can go into a web page and pull a link out quicker than anybody. It always
Right.
impresses the execs in the room. And I'm like, I'll show you where the link is. Go into view source and let me get it for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Understanding how things are built.
Mm.
I'm the guy who took apart his first computer. I took apart my first TV. I
Right.
took apart my first toy train. All of them. This is not sad, but all of those were hand downs. So that was part of the factor, by the way. I took them
Right.
apart knowing that they were a gift, but if they say if it's not broke, don't fix it. I did not have that mentality, and not that I felt like I could fix it. I just wanted to understand how things worked,
Yeah.
because then I
The
could
inquisitive
understand
mind, right?
how I could work with them. Like, for
Mm.
me, it was all about collaboration. If they're tactical, then I could be strategic. If I'm creative, then I need a tactician to help me. If I'm in creative mode, I need someone to be able to help me publish. If I'm creating, it's like I can't play the piano. I couldn't get 2 hands to do 2 different things at the same time. But I've learned to collaborate my entire career and my entire life. I've learned to
Mm.
collaborate to get
Yeah.
the results, not the process. It's not about the tools. It's not about the way I go about it. It's who I'm doing it with. That
Yeah.
to me mattered
It's
the
more fun
most.
that way.
And that turned out to be networking, which I didn't know
Yes.
I was doing then. And so I would approach these shows at MTV. I would get an assignment, cast the host for the challenge.
Mm.
And our executive at MTV was an avid skier, and it was the Olympics. It was big. And Johnny Mosley, the American Olympian, gold time medalist, had just hosted SNL. I thought, this is a great way for me to get an athlete onto the network. Now, I worked at MTV like in the late 90s. That's right when ESPN2
Right.
had a big presence and pulled every male viewer off that. And MTV stopped playing music, and the music we were playing was more boy band,
Mm-hmm.
girl pop. So we tried to create MTV2 for more of those male viewers that were leaving MTV, but they weren't. They were just going to ESPN2. I got to work on Rock and Jock football and like all like the sports and music festival. Tony Hawk jumping out of helicopters,
Right.
like the weirdest things. And there was no space for athletes at that network.
Mm.
And athletes have a challenging schedule. There's
Yeah.
on and off cycles. So working with an Olympian was tough because he's got a cycle. Dave Mira, X Games was just becoming commercialized and really seen as a sport nationwide. Dave Mira was the rising star of that. So we were able to work with him. God rest his soul, an amazing guy. Did a couple of seasons. But again, they had seasons. And it was TJ Lavin, the guy who's currently hosting it now. He's hosted it for like 40 something,
Years.
shows now. And it's so cool because I remember
Like 40 years, right?
It's forever. By the way, him and Rob Dyrdek and Nick Cannon are like the old guys
Oh
on
my
the network.
gosh, yeah.
It's so fun to know I was there, and I brought Nick and TJ into the equation. And now we're at Generation Alpha, so that's 3 generations that they've helped shape, and it's a lot of pressure, guys. but we had
so
this
much fun,
conversation
though.
back then. We said, look, it's not about being in the room and being on camera. It's about making a project so you can bring in the right people to work on them. I got to MTV right after MTV Raps was launched, after major conversations about culture had been addressed. And what happens is, as is anything, when you fix something, you kind of rush. In the beginning, there's like a quick rush and then an unfortunate lull. I started right at that rush. Unfortunately for me, that's my energy. That's the change. That's the level.
That's not unfortunate.
Well, I know for everyone, it can be exhausting. I realize this. Power can be pushy sometimes, if not persuasive. Emotion can be misjudged as if it's not a real data point. By the way, we want our content to be successful, but like creativity, the more you have the more creativity you have, the more you spend, the more you have. I think
but there's power in energy, because you can have still energy, which is still powerful, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then you can have vibrant energy that's really bursting at the seams almost, right? And that one is the one that's a little dangerous, because you don't really know what's going to trigger it off, right? Sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's funny you say that. For me, it's about boundaries. I love that you just said that, because even you said it. I think we're a couple of weeks into 2023. Yes, but also I have an annualized strategy. I have a word of the month, and it's the same word of the month that I've had now for 3 years that I've been using this strategy. It gives me peace of mind. It lets me know that in January I have this one presence, not with a TS, obviously. That was December's word. No, I'm kidding. But presence, our presence, accepting our presence, owning our presence, being in our presence, really, really understanding the shape of our shadow. The imprint that we make, the footprints that we make, the evergreen and the overnight. So I have words so that I can be focused throughout the year, and I hope to have many annual loops. But that's my strategy. Is not that I'm depending on time to happen, but it allows me to be present, and I think I have both vibes that you're describing here. I can definitely be magnetic level, and as well as consistent but that's the listener part in me too. I think that's
you need that in order to have that balance, right? I'm curious what motivated you to get even into this industry, right? To help other people. We know that you wanted to help your siblings, right? But what inspired you, or who led you in this direction that you are in now? What was your first break, if you will, in show business? How did you even come about it?
Oh yeah. Ooh. Okay. So,
I'm bringing you back.
So it was October 98. Picture it, Sicily, 1998, Staten Island, 1998. I'm a senior in college. I had a conversation with a friend, a very smart friend, by the way, and ultimately went to something called the Landmark Forum. Are you familiar with it?
No.
Landmark Forum. And in this seminar series, I learned, the version of our story is not maybe necessarily that's something true, like that maybe we are just like bad storytellers inherently, and we inherently make ourselves the victim, thinking that we're making ourselves the hero. And if we can change our story, we can change our reality. And that like blew my mind. I
I
changed the
gotcha.
spelling of my name from Vinny with a Y to Vinny with an IE that night, because IE was like a hint towards a feminine word in Italian and in Spanish. And I wanted to let the world know who I was without having to talk about my sexuality. And the IE for me also was a change from my father is Vinnie Potestivo as well. So I'm again seeking individuality and
Right.
seeking unique ways to stand out.
Mm.
By the way, changing people's spellings of their names, that's a secret trick that I'm really good at. And you'd be surprised at some celebrity names that I helped create. I'm good at that, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
When you ID, I'm good at the ID, and when you're doing the rebuild. So um, it was a Thursday night, and I think I called everyone in my family and had the conversation about being gay and being comfortable with it and just getting it out in the open and ripping the Band-Aid off. It was a Saturday that I decided I wanted to be a casting director because I just wanted to be surrounded by talent. I feel like
Mm.
when I'm surrounded by people, I take on those traits. If it's comedians, I think I'm funnier. If it's artists, I think I can
Right.
paint better. It's the weirdest, and it's sick, but it's true. I don't
You
even want to get
adapt to the
into it
room?
though. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's my number one coping mechanism, by the way, is how to
Mm.
blend and
Yeah.
win people over quickly. That's a casting skill set.
Right. Yeah.
I knew not a single person in the entertainment industry. I wanted to be a casting director. And now the person says to me, well, then you have to say you're a casting director in your head, and you have to act like you're a casting director. And it kind of upset me
Mm.
because they just said act on it. I now tell people to take inspired action, and I now know what that means. But if I
Right.
told me that then, I would have no clue what that meant.
Right.
For me, what I did is there was this thing called Backstage Magazine. It's where you would go to find like non-union actors and models and people who wanted to be in commercials that didn't have representation. And I took out an ad, $20. I said, I'm Vinnie Potestivo, casting director. Send me your headshots and resumes. I'm looking for future work, for future talent, for future projects. If you'd like me to be in my files, send me your information. 1 Campus Road, Wagner College, Student Box 577. I can put my student address down. I didn't even think about anything. And I had about 700 responses in a month.
Wow.
About 700
Out of
responses.
$20. Look at
At
that.
$20. I turned to my job at the computer center. I built a database on Microsoft Excel. Actually, it was Access. It was really pretty. I had the Access. Oof, I was like so into it. I got the macros to do everything.
Cool.
And then I would, while I'm getting paid at the student computer center, I would scan this magazine. I now had inputted everyone's information into my database. And if I found an opportunity that I thought was like right for them, I would just scan it in and send it to them via email. Now that's like a newsletter, and now we
Right.
understand like some mass communication. And then about a month into that, I realized this as I'm looking through these ads, this casting director from MTV says, "Oh, come to 45th and Broadway at this time. Whitney Houston's going to be there. Join the audience." And I was available that day,
Mm.
class wise, so I took a couple of friends and we went to Times Square in Times Square, MTV Times Square, and I got picked to ask Whitney Houston a question. What was it like recording with Mariah Carey on the Prince of Egypt soundtrack? That was my question. And when Whitney came out to the stage manager, she points to me and she says, "This is the guy. He's going to ask the question." She tells the question, and I see Whitney say, "I'm not answering that question." Different question. And I was like, "No, this is my moment." And I turned to the casting director, and they were like, "Oh, thank you so much." And I was like, "Hey, this was a blast. And if you ever need any help, I have a database like 700 people." And he was like, "What? A
Mm.
database? 700? Where are they?" And I started at Fox News and then Food Network, worked my way back to MTV, and then in 99, 9999,
Look at that.
they wanted to create a talent development department. And first, my job was to help organize the castings.
Mm.
I'm good at database. Then it was give the talent their call sheets and their information, their schedules for spring break. And now I'm flying to spring break. And at first, I'm a travel coordinator for celebrities, and then
That's awesome.
I'm a personal assistant on site. And then 10 years later, I'm the one that's helping get these people these jobs and make the impact that they're making. But I thought MTV was the magic place, by the way. I got to be honest, in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was all about the audience. To have millions of people watch my
Oh
content
yeah, yeah.
in
That's
TV is something
incredible.
that, and that's why I really feel called as an independent creator to help people take broadcast to podcast. In 2006, I converted my first podcast into a broadcast TV show called Man and Wife. It featured Fat Man Scoop and his then wife Shonda, and they were just a couple that talked about sex, and they weren't just two old like white guys that talked about sex like I learned in Loveline, in the early 90s. And not to say anything's wrong with that, but it was just a different time for a different conversation. And podcasting brought me there in 06. But MTV didn't like the podcasts.
No, not at
There
all.
were some legal things happening, which, by the way, I later learned Adam Curry, one of the VJs, bought MTV.com. MTV literally said, "Why would we ever need MTV.com or a TV network? So take it, it's yours. Just make it look like ours." And then ultimately, MTV wanted it in 2003. That happened. And in 2005, Adam's credited with creating the RSS links that connect podcasts to the directories. He's kind of the pod father.
Wow.
So there's this real interesting energy around podcasts at MTV. YouTube is starting to, get on our turf. The YouTube is saying things like the Janet Jackson Super Bowl moment was the most watched moment in the history of YouTube. That's our audience. So now, and I realized the world was bigger. And it wasn't just on TV, by the way. The explosion of thousands of cable channels, added, all of which, so by the way, I've experienced tremendous growth in the industry before. People are so nervous about podcasting, but there's something. Are you kidding me? You know how many reality shows, let alone how many networks, movies, poems, like how many different cars? Are you crazy? And by the way,
there's plenty of space for everybody, right?
We are making the space. We are the alchemy of what is expanding. It is this collaboration. It is your episode. It is now. We have multiple series. Now there are multiple collaborations, and this is evergreen content. It doesn't go away like social media. What's happening on podcasting? This is the building blocks, in a lot of ways, the building blocks for the future of communication. This is archival conversations we'll be able to go back into.
Yeah.
So
I had a conversation this morning with my co-host. I have a different show called The Seer Show.
Yeah.
And she was going, Raphael, I was looking at, because we branch it out into my YouTube, her YouTube. She's in Australia. She's like, that episode we did 3 weeks ago? And she's like, oh my God, I just looked at it. 9.5 million people have watched it.
Congratulations.
And then other episodes. She's like, wait a minute, this one got 2.4 million. This one got 5.9 million. She's like, oh my God. She's like, I can't believe this. I'm like, because we're original, because we are doing something that people want, right?
Yeah.
And the cool thing about what you and I do, obviously you've been doing it longer than I have, and it's bringing original content, right? And if people, here's the cool thing, if you don't like it, click next, next.
That's
you
the
don't
beauty,
have to like me either,
because then you don't have an upset seeing TV. So this weird thing, that's a little trigger, right? TV, this weird TV industry is a thing it's like a weird thing to me, because I see it as an advertising industry with a TV leg. Like, let's call it that. Let's call it an advertising, because Red Bull and Axe body spray, I know, paid my paycheck for 10 years. By the way, that's how I paid off my student loans. So Don't get me wrong. Like I had a very focused, regimented, and I came, as I said, like multiple children in my family, single parent family. And my mom was a teacher. To be really honest, I thought $19,000 a year was a lot. Like I thought a lot. And that's how I thought That's why I thought millionaires and $1 million was so far away, because everybody must make $20,000.
Right.
When I worked as a computer programmer at Credit Suisse First Boston in my first summer, making $75 an hour, time and a half for Y2K compliancy, like
Yes.
Euro databases and stuff like that. My mind was blown. I had no relationship with money. I had no understanding of how, like, the scope of it. I didn't realize, to be honest, I didn't realize how small my little world was. And I'm like, I'm from Staten Island. Everyone's name is Vinny. I haven't met
Yeah.
more than 2 other Vinnies in New York. The perception, and that story that, that we tell ourselves, it just, I remember realizing I was just making myself so small. And when I got to MTV, I didn't know any better. I just got big. I didn't say I was I was a fuller version of myself. I don't want to say I got,
You found you.
and that allowed me to resonate and create some space and trust and pioneer some new ways. When I turned 40 about 5 years ago, I had this idea to maybe make myself a little bit smaller, to work with some larger independent voices, because for some reason in my head I felt like I need to be smaller to work with larger, and then I couldn't have been more wrong. By the way, what a great journey to have gone through 5 years ago. And I was like, I'm just not resonating the way that it used to resonate. And that's where the podcast came to be. And that's why I had to step, for 20 years, I've been in the room making impact, removing my presence from the tape. For 20 years, 25 years, I've been auditioning people, having this dialogue, and then cutting my voice out of the tape, throwing a bunch of photos on it and sending it into the network and saying, I'd like you to meet Sifu Raphael. And then I play some music, and there's a montage, I got all your funny sound bites, and we're off. There I am, and what a deflection mechanism that was. I mean, I'm very proud of the work I did. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy that I could be aware there was a lot of deflecting of my own personal development there. And I became really happy to do what people wanted me to do, because I was good at it. And then I realized, if I'm so damn good at it, why do I have to only look for single women over 50? Because that's what the network wants, or real couples going through a divorce that they don't know how to split their assets up. Like those are, or find a family to renovate their home because, someone's got an illness. Well, that's a beautiful story to watch. But as an empath, I've got to find 5 families that are like that. And 4 of them aren't getting that. And I know those 4 as well as I know that 5th. It made me think of when you said we've got 9 million views and we've got like 2 million views. Those videos as well as the videos that have 5. And 7. You love them. You love them as much, and I see that in you, because you have a healthy relationship between content. Serves the audience. Content doesn't bring the audience to you; it serves it. Like, we want them fed and empowered and inspired and motivated with direction. So I really love what your energy is, by the way. And
thank you.
Point that out.
I appreciate that. A lot of people are. I think they go into podcasting for different reasons, right?
Yeah.
You have your reason, you went into it. I have my reason. But at the end of the day, you have to realize that if you're struggling doing it, then maybe you should not be podcasting, right? It should be some sort of a passion. Yes, for some people it's a business, right? For me, I do it because my impact of bringing people like yourself to help someone. Maybe someone says, oh, I can't do what Raphael does, what Vinny does, what so-and-so does. Everybody who thinks they're going into podcasting, they think they're going to be Joe Rogan. There's one Joe Rogan, people. He's the only one. You're not him, right? You're not
Take
Joe
the pressure
Rogan.
off. Take the pressure off, right?
Take
Absolutely.
the pressure off. Listen.
And by the way, there are days that he doesn't want to be him either, I bet. You see, that's a tough spot. That's a hot
oh, man,
seat
I
to
got to
sit
do
in.
another show.
That's a hot seat to sit in.
But here's the thing, right? When we think about the impact that podcasting is doing for people, because I don't get into my car and put on the radio. I either put on a podcast or I put an audiobook. Because for me, it's information. I'm always looking to learn something. And podcasting has allowed people to do it. Now, my girlfriend, she does podcasting for entertainment. And that's good for her. She likes, mystery and like she follows all that, those psychopaths
True
and all that
crime.
kind of
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that's what she loves, right? And then I know other people that, they go to podcasts because they want to know deeper about a celebrity or about a certain thing. So podcasting definitely is a world that you can dive into, and you can be there for 24 hours a day, 7 days
Sure.
a week, right? But I think that also, I'm going to be honest with you. I wanted to get more into the Bible, and I picked up the Bible, I threw it away. I picked up the Bible, I threw it away because I read it from front to back, and it made zero sense. I said, I bet you there's a podcast out there that's going to teach me how to interpret the Bible a little better. So I found one, and I was like, wow, big
Wow.
difference. Now I
Can I
appreciate it.
ask, was it the King James version that you read?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's King James. Yeah.
That's of all the versions and all the ways to talk about that book, my personal experience, that too has been the hardest for me to wrap my head around as a book, as stories, as scripture, as words, as paragraphs, as parables, as stories. I
Right.
had a very hard time because of how things were structured,
Mhm.
um, as well too.
Yeah.
Specifically with that version, there were other versions that, and through dialogue, yeah, through active for me, I'm thinking back to the Bible Baptist Christian Academy as a kid,
Right.
where I can spell Potestivo and Deuteronomy. As a as a 5-year-old, I was ready to go. But but yeah, it was in those adult conversations that I was able to wrap my head around around that a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's great that the podcast was able to connect you to that. Do you
Oh my
continue
gosh.
listening to it now? I mean, first you go there because you have a question. Now you realize you have more questions.
Yeah. That's the beauty of learning, right?
Yeah,
If you don't have more questions, then you're done learning,
yeah.
right? So you have a podcast, right? But tell me about your podcast because it does help people in a different way. And when we think about the positivity of what you're doing, let's talk about that for a minute, if you don't mind.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I have a
Absolutely.
podcast. It's called I Have a Podcast, which I'm very excited about. And I called it I Have a Podcast because I've worked really hard in this career. And there are people in my career and my industry that I have already an existing relationship with that I'm signaling to. And I'm
Mm.
telling them I have a podcast. Y'all know I had TV shows. Y'all know I had production companies. Y'all know I had network TV. I want you to know what I have. I don't want it to get lost. I could have come up with a fun name that maybe was a little bit more spot on to the
Right.
to the actual promise of my podcast. I picked a big clunky name
Mm.
because one, everyone says it all the time. I love it. It's so fun. Oh, I have a podcast and it's called. I'm like,
No, that's it. You
you know
stop
what I
at I
mean?
have
Like
a
that's
podcast.
Also, I have a podcast is a nod to growing up in Al-Anon and Alateen. If I knew who a recovering addict was
Mm.
and they identified themselves, I knew what tools they were working with. I knew the 12 steps I could reference. I knew the ways that I can connect with them, um, in an educated way. The same as podcasters.
Mm.
We're a little different than social media influencers who create content. There's a different level of networking and researching and publishing, and the nuances of podcasting are different than in social media. Podcasting is a privately owned media versus social media, which is a publicly owned media platform.
Right.
So big differences there. And if you've got podcast skills, whether you're a guest or a host, I'm signaling to you also. I have a podcast on TV, is our television show. We're distributed on Cox, Comcast, Verizon, PlayStation, and a couple of AVOD networks.
Nice.
I have a podcast on the radio, is our syndicated radio show, which is a half hour weekly, and we pick different. So I'm able to tap into half hours that already exist during morning drives or afternoon drives, where there's already an existing audience, and I'm able to leverage an existing audience with
Mm.
my podcast. So I'm enjoying the podcast as a format, but just an FYI, that's a little bit of a different ecosystem and distribution system that I sought out to
Mhm.
do.
Nice.
And my podcast, I sit down with people I've already worked with. So to your point about a lot of people using podcasting as networking, I wanted to show it as proof of long-term relationships
Mhm.
in the creative community. So there's no one that really I'm talking to on my podcast that I don't know for like at least 20 years or so. And the coolest thing now is that journey. I can sit down with Mandy Moore and we talk about the Princess Diaries, and then the Rapunzel and Tangled, and then This Is Us, and make sense of some of the decisions in between, all those important decisions that no one really gets to be a part of or see or understand how it works.
Right.
She's so brilliant. Early last year, she said the input dictates the output. I can't tell you, and that's really a nod to like consume television, consume
Mhm.
media.
Right.
Be aware, the ingredients are going to affect the food. I
Mhm.
can't tell you how many times I've used that quote now in the context of Chat GPT. Well, I had a hard time. You know what I mean? The
Right.
input, isn't that right? That all this the future of AI, the input dictates the
Mhm.
output. If you don't know who you are, it's hard to show up for others. And
Without a doubt.
I learned that. I learned that from awesome, powerful creators that have been entertaining us, educating us. I realized at MTV that I was creating a part of the team that was creating these big talent brands, and some of these talent would go on to change like laws and legislature and will fight for my rights to marry who I want to marry and be able to
Mm.
have children. And like I realized there were some people that felt called to do something bigger with their fame, to make bigger change, that I got close with, that I got to work. Beyonce,
Right.
Mandy Moore. I mean, these are people who show, Ashton Kutcher. These are people who show up like and fight for us, and fight for us, as I said earlier, in the room when we're not there.
Right.
That's a big part of what I think about when I'm at MTV 2002 to 2007, where I feel empowered with the decisions I'm making. The people we're picking are the people who are sticking, and I want them to make bigger, better change. And I think that allowed me to surround myself with people who saw media as a springboard,
Mhm.
as a simple platform. Think of TV. So if Instagram is a platform and then reels and stories and all those things are surfaces, then think of TV as a platform and all the surfaces are like HBO and
Right.
Netflix. Well, now you can watch Netflix on TV, and helping get you there. I'm good at that,
Mm.
and there's no direct route. By the way, I've got a show right now in like maybe it's still in the top 10. It was like a week ago. I've got a show on Netflix right now in the top 10 most viewed shows. It's a show that I was a part of 25 years ago
Oh,
called
wow.
Laguna Beach. And
Okay.
then we had a spin-off show called The Hills. And these two shows have hit the public zeitgeist, courtesy of a podcast. Back
Mm.
to the Beach, by the way. Shout out to Stephen Coletti and
Nice.
Kristen Cavallari, and they're the ones who really put it back. But podcasting, that story behind the story, is what brought it back. So if you ask me how to get your show on Netflix, that's an unfortunate answer I've got for you. Is cast a show and wait 20 years.
Yeah.
My point is, there's a very non-linear success journey
Mhm.
in the creative arts. Let's not even say in media. We know painters who were not alive to realize the scope of awesomeness that we see them as. They
Right.
died without having a single audience, and we now hold them as irreverent. And I
Mhm.
feel really called at this blip, this moment of time, this little time that we're all here on this earth, where everything is happening, the challenges we have, the ways, the
Mhm.
obstacles that we can come together or not to. I know the thing that I can do is help people communicate creatively better, effectively, whether you're a business or a talent brand. That's the thing that I can say with confidence I know how to do. Get you to get discovered and stand out, give you more visibility to communicate creatively. Creatively. I like that. I
Right.
like that. And there's love and compassion and
There
humor
is.
in
There
that,
is.
you
Yeah.
know?
I love the fact of visibility, right? because if you are not seen, nobody knows you're there, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like when if you chop down a tree in a forest and who's going to hear it?
Right.
Only the people who are in the forest and near it, because the forest is big, right? So even thinking about podcasting, a lot of people say, "Oh, the market is full." No, the market is not full. There is so many chances, and that's why when somebody like yourself who comes on my show and they have a podcast, I want to talk about their podcast because I want to encourage people to go listen to your show, right?
Thanks.
You may be listening to mine. That's cool, and I appreciate you. But hey, here's someone else you can listen to. Somebody who's making a difference. Somebody who, hey, listen, they're having great conversations. You're having great conversations with people that you've known for 20 years or more. But let me ask you another question. Are you willing to have conversations with new friends?
Yeah. So this is funny you say that. So because of the construct, because I was sensitive about people perceiving me as like a talent booker, and I don't want to show my entire Rolodex. I just want to
Right.
show, by the way, also what's unique about my podcast is I think I'm gonna have the same 12 people back over and over again. I think
Nice.
the guests are who the guests are. I got years of stuff to talk about, creative
Mm,
challenges that you don't even know exist that we need to get into the nitty gritty of,
yes.
contract negotiations and ways to get out of compromising situations, unconscious bias in the interviews. I mean, there's so many things that I have access to
Mm,
some of the biggest performers. Why would I not? So that's one thing
okay.
that's kind of slightly unique. By the way, some of those names, Mandy Moore, Jamie Lynn Sigler, who's on Big Sky, ABC's Big Sky right now. Many of us know her as Meadow Soprano.
Hmm.
Christina Milian has been a guest. Danielle Fishel, Topanga from Boy Meets World, has been a guest. And by the way, many of them have gone on to have podcasts after. So it's so cool.
That is
It's so,
cool.
so cool, by the way. I feel like the level of inspiring, I get on the mic
Hmm.
and I'm called to have them do that. I created ihaveapodcast.com as a platform to share and create. Basically, I created ihaveapodcast.com so that I can write articles about new friends that I don't have on my podcast because of the construct of my show, and that I write an article, a featured article about them that hits Google and is distributed and aggregated through a couple of hundred different blog sites and gets really big impressions. And
Nice.
I created this database. Let's call it. I went. Here's it. By the
You're
way, I
still a
realized
database
I
guy.
went to the database. I have, some of it is people that have, like you, that have, I have one-on-one relationship with. Some come from Good Pods or Podmatch, Cap Show. Like I'm starting to meet some awesome sources of
Mm,
podcasters that I really connect with. I built it as a platform for them. So it's all about, I need to say your name. And so your name in the article, not your
mm,
podcast name. It's not about your podcast. I'm making an article about you. To
right.
me, I saw that in press, there's not enough articles about podcasters. There's listicles and there's
Mm,
category conversations, and it's usually focused, if anything, on our podcast. But to get verified on social media, you
mhm.
need news articles about you. So I became a Google News certified source for,
Beautiful.
and then I realized, well, wait, the same thing that happened to me like 25 years ago. I said, well, wait, I have a podcast.com. How come, like, maybe I should put my podcast on it? And like, how come like, that's
Yes,
like
you
a
should.
weird, like, yeah, I didn't even think about that until afterwards. And then I thought, you know what? Why don't we just blow this up and make it like a magazine and make it like a place where independent podcasters. I want to be the first person who ever interviewed you. I'm the first. Like that's the one thing I got is like
Mm,
I like OG casting. So like
mhm.
people are like, why are you in podcasts? And you know how much new talent is in this industry?
Oh my gosh.
It's all new talent. It's all expert new talent. It's blowing my mind. Like
Mhm.
I appreciate the podcasting industry as a silo,
Oh
but
yeah.
how podcasting fractures those silos, those economic silos, how I'm meeting dentists and doctors and accountants and a dentist, a doctor, an accountant, and a casting director walk into a bar. It sounds like a joke, to record a podcast. It
Yeah,
sounds
yeah.
normal. It's a really cool time to be helping people own their creative communication skills. And right now, if you can own the IP, if you're like right now, you have, you own the IP. That's why I think also why podcasting works for me is because you own it. I trust you.
Hmm.
I've
Yeah.
been to networks. I've worked for big companies that are on the stock exchange and have board of advisors. You lose control past a certain
Mhm.
point. You said a
Right.
couple of things earlier. People who are afraid to hop on, to podcasting. No one owns podcasting. I believe in people. And
Right.
also before podcasting, I got to say, just, self-confidence. That's the one thing I would say that everyone needs to work on, regardless of who you are. Trust me. If you think I worked with the one percenters, any of the names that I've dropped, by the way, I've had this conversation. I've been the person in the room confirming what capabilities these people have. These
Mm.
doubts, they crawl in. They
Yeah.
crawl in when what I am doing, what I could be doing, when that is too much,
Mhm.
too much space to crawl in. So we close that space. We start more action. We start
Yeah.
focusing on the things I should do and not could do. And that
Yeah.
that that makes me happier. This way, my story isn't taking me to places where my character shouldn't be. My story will go places. It's my character for me that matters. And
Well,
I
that's who you're with
yeah,
at the end of the day, right?
that's it. At the very end of the day, in that box, it's just us, just
It
me,
it
myself, and I.
those are the only ones. The
Yeah,
ones that matter are the ones that look back in the mirror,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's the only person that truly matters.
I love
And it's
that
not being
presence.
selfish
Presence.
when
I
you
love that.
take care of you, right?
Oh no.
It's because listen, the most important thing I always say is it's not selfish when you focus on you. It's self-serving, yes, but if you can take care of you first and you prioritize yourself, then you can make room for others and you can help other people, just the way you did with your siblings, right?
Yeah.
You realize that, hey, you know what? I got this gift, but I didn't necessarily need it. But did you give it to them? Can you give it to them, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
can see that's the kind of
Oh
person
my
you are. You're a
gosh.
very giving type of person.
That's it. By the way, hang out with me. By the way, as I'm starting to crawl into the space that I'm in and I'm doing more public appearances, if you want more, this is a weird thing to say, but if anyone watching this wants more public appearances, hang out, hang out with me because I'm getting asked a lot to do things. And I'm at a stage where I can say, well, also, what about, and I have a list of names. I'm not going to take a step forward if I can't be inclusive. Inclusivity is part by design of how I'm moving forward. So I'm not going into spaces that are big enough for me. I'm going into spaces that are big enough for us. And what I want to really do is take our audiences and build more communities. Two audiences or more is a community. I'd love to build an audience. I'm
Oh yeah.
more focused on building a community. I'm better at building community
Mhm.
than audience, or maybe I just feel like I can, and that's
Oh,
what I
yeah.
should
Well,
do.
you just talked
Yeah.
about the true success, right? True success is you can be in the penthouse, but do you want to be in the penthouse by yourself? Or do you want to have some people to enjoy the penthouse with, right? You can live in a big mansion, but if there's no warmth in that mansion, what good is it? Yeah, you can lounge out, you can sit in any room you want, but you're by yourself.
Oh, it's so true. I actually, yeah. Right now, as I grow my podcast presence in the industry, it's person by person. That's my strategy. I'm just meeting people. I'm good at building a fortress, a stage, a platform, brick by brick, one by one.
Mm.
Yeah, that really resonates. That really resonates with me.
So
Well,
you're
thank you
gonna
for this.
have to
Yeah.
be in New York, June 22nd through the 25th,
All right.
because I'm doing a big event
Sounds
and I
good.
need you at it.
I'm in
I need
Brooklyn.
everybody
Sign me.
listening to come to it. It's going to be a business. I'm going to have celebrities in their own right, right? Like if you're not in front of the TV, if you're not, the camera's not on you, that does not mean you're not a celebrity. If you have any background, if you wrote a book, if you helped one person, to me, you're a big deal, right? So I'm going to have authors there. I'm going to have business people there. I'm going to have doctors there. I'm going to have all kinds of people there who are going to impact your life. So do I want everybody there? Absolutely. Will everybody come? No. but that's okay. Only the important people will be there. And that's why I'm inviting you personally, my
Thank you
friend.
very much.
I definitely think about June 22nd through the 25th in New York. I'm looking out for the venue. I'm trying to find a place. You're in New York too, right? You're in
I am.
Staten
I'm in
Island?
Brooklyn. I'm in Brooklyn right
Oh,
now.
Brooklyn,
Yeah.
Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you never know. Maybe you have a really cool place out there that you
We'll
can tell me
talk. By
about.
the
I'd love-
way, I would recommend Peerspace, PeersPace.com. It's a great space for creators looking for hour to hour or even events. If you want like an Instagram kind of looking room, or
Right.
a, content kind of room, or a flat studio with uplighting, or a conference for 50 to 100 people. The Peerspace.com has some. The restaurant next to me is even on Peerspace for $500 an hour. I
Oh,
think
really?
Gossip Girl shot there too. So like, there's some
Nice.
cool thing. Peerspace.com. It's a great resource for
Cool.
indie creators.
Thank you. Thank you. But I also need to have a venue where I can have people come in. I have people coming from all over the world. I got people coming from the UK, Australia,
Cool.
Singapore,
That's
Italy.
it.
So
I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
let me tell you, man, it's going to be a blast. And when we think about uniting people, this is why I've done the shows. People say, well, you don't have commercials on your podcast. I'm like, yeah. Are you going to have? I'm like, no. Why not? I said, because it's about the connection. Listen, we're having a conversation. Imagine in the middle of it, I'm like, wait, Vinny, chill out. You got to wait 5-6 minutes and we're going to put a commercial on for you. Maybe
Yeah.
8 commercials. It stops the flow. So for me, connecting with somebody, I don't want an interruption. So for me, it's about connecting, becoming friends with somebody. I have interviewed, oh my God, I think I'm going on 350 coaches. And it's huge for me. And the fact that all these people are now, we're connected, that's huge.
Yeah.
And I know you're doing the same thing. And you said one of the most important things, and I said that's where you really talked about business. Business is about connecting people and bringing them along on a great journey. So I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Well, and I appreciate you having this conversation on LinkedIn. I like the journey happening on LinkedIn because
Yeah.
I like the action that happens on LinkedIn.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I know we're up on the
We're
hour, but
done.
like, thank you so much
Oh my gosh.
for the intentionality of
Yeah.
this conversation, and I'm looking forward to what happens next. By the way,
Looking forward to myself, my friend. Have an amazing, amazing day.
thanks, you too, bud.
All right. Bye-bye.